It's that time again. Everybody, it's Friday, the day that you just love because it's the start of the weekend. Hey, how you doing, everybody? It's your girl, Michelle Rhett, the Holy Ghost Amplifier, once again for another edition of Church at Risk Live, the radio show. I'm so excited to have you on the air today. I'm so excited to talk why. Two great things happened. Number one, the Golden State Warriors took the NBA championship. Oh my goodness, I've tried to be quiet. I've been with this team for about 10 years. I've watched them matriculate and grow into the baddest force in NBA history. Oh, I don't care what they say about LeBron James being one of the greatest basketball players of all times. Anyway, I just love this team, and the addition of Kevin Durant made them unstoppable. So congratulations to my men in the Oakland area. All right, the Golden State Warriors. And to all men, we salute you because this is the week that everybody tries to forget about. Father's Day. Yay! Happy Father's Day to all my male listeners. Happy Father's Day to my wonderful father, Malachi Rhett. He's in Petersburg, Virginia. We absolutely love and adore you, Daddy. This is Mickey Mouse, your youngest, 4 of 4, wishing you happy Father's Day and joining in with your other 3 children. Your other 3 children. Oops, that was a slip. Your other 3 children as we wish you happy Father's Day. And to my uncle, my wonderful uncle, who's my second father, Mr. Arthur Morris the Fourth, Bubby. All right, we wish you a very, very happy Father's Day, and know that I love you, and that if I can surprise you guys this weekend, I will. I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try to do that, okay? All right, in our prayer section, we always start out, before we get into what we're going to talk about, we always talk about whether there's a need for prayer. And as many of you know, there was a horrific fire in London. Many people were killed, including children. And so we want to lift up those families in London. And let me encourage all of you that when you pray, that you include in your prayers for other people in other countries. Don't just assume that the only people that you're responsible for praying for is yourself and your family. You are responsible for praying for everyone that has a need, and that includes those in other cultures and other families. And so I definitely lift up prayers to those people in London. I also want to lift up prayers for the people that were impacted in Alexandria, Virginia, as Congressman Scalise was shot, was one of the people, but who was really shot and close range, was the 2 Capitol police officers who defended the congressman and who were there and took immediate quick action to the lone shooter. So our prayers are to all of the communities impacted by violence on this week and every week. And we just believe that Jesus is at a fence around us and that we are protected from the tragedies that could happen in this country. So we're continuing to believe God for a display of more love in this world, and to attack the hand of the enemy, to just take it back, so that a lot of what you see today, our children don't have to grow up in a world of violence as they've had to do. I remember when I was a child, to say that something was violent or someone got shot was a rarity. And now it's commonality. People expect to hear that people get shot. As a matter of fact, I attended a phenomenal concert with the Singing Sensations Youth Choir of Baltimore, and it was incredible. So I can't wait to have this choir at the 2017 Church at Risk National Summit, November 9th through the 11th, 2017. Meet us. Hey, they will be performing on Thursday, November 9th after 7 p.m. as our opening service begins. They are the entertainment. These young people are going to take you on a ride you never thought you'd want to go. And when they begin to praise, it seems like all of heaven and earth opens up. But not just that, I'm going to have them tease you a little bit and show you what they're really made of. This dynamic choir, led by Dr. Holly Mincy from Morgan State University, is absolutely incredible. I'm 52 years old, and I told them, I said, I cried when I heard them sing. And I mean, they've got some incredible talent. And so they're going to showcase that talent for our 2017 Church at Risk National Summit, being held in Arlington, Virginia at the Renaissance Capitol View Hotel, November 9th through the 11th. And I hope you will join us there. please consider joining us there. I guess the biggest announcement that I want to make to you is that I've got an upcoming tour coming up. As I mentioned to those of you last week, I have a tour where I'm touring on my book, The Resurrection of Passion. We have a passion tour that's about 5 states. And then I've got a tour going on where we're getting Church at Risk out again. And we're doing a lot on Church at Risk to promote what it is that we offer to the community. And of course, I also am a podcaster, as those of you know that. And I used to have a radio show. And one day I'll go back to live radio, but I love being a podcaster. So, June 24th, 2017, Goose Creek, Charleston, South Carolina, the Logan Power Hour will feature myself, Michelle Rhett, Church at Risk, Jamise Wilson, Miss Benita, Miss B. Claiborne, and Adrian Roberts. I mean, we're going to set the stage. So you want to be there. If you're in the Charleston area, we invite you to come to the live recording. I think it starts at 9:30, so be there at 9. I'm talking to all you Rhett people that live in Goose Creek and that live in Charleston as well. Please join us on the 24th. I will be in your area on the 23rd. So if family want to pay for a girl's dinner, come on now, Tracy. All right now, I'll be waiting for it, okay? So, on today, I wanted to talk to you about some of the services that my firm provides, because many people ask, what is Church at Risk? I'm going to ask all of my listeners to right now do something. Go to Facebook and go to Church at Risk. Put it in your search engine and like our page. Like our page. Become a part of this movement that started. Church at Risk is a training program for not just churches, but for corporations, for nonprofits, that basically deals with every aspect of the administration of business. And so it's a legal review that looks at every aspect of administration of business. And so the first 10-volume set was called Church at Risk because we wanted to highlight those things that impact the church that they were unaware of. Churches are often blindsided by lawsuits. They're blindsided by compliance violations. And so we wanted to take it further and empower churches by teaching them ways that they can minimize the impact of a lawsuit, because lawsuits are quite devastating on churches. The average church can't afford a lawsuit. They can't afford to hire an attorney or hire a major law firm to get them out of it. And so they're stuck. They're stuck. And that's what we saw happening. We saw churches closing their doors. We saw churches filing bankruptcy. We saw churches going into foreclosure. We saw pastors going to prison. We saw leaders going to prison. We saw boards of trustees, joint boards, deacon boards. We saw so much devastation in the lives of people who have committed their service to the community. And so we wanted to put an end to it. And so our answer was a series that is called Church at Risk, and now a national phenomenon called Church at Risk, as you know, hosting its second or first national summit this year, November 9th through the 11th. So that's the basis for what Church at Risk is. Well, Church at Risk is just one of our major products. It became the biggest product for us because it was one book that, because of the demand that we had from pastors and leaders in the church, we then expanded. So we started with just talking about sexual misconduct in the church, and that was our volume 1. And then we found out that churches are engaging into all of these quasi-contracts that compromise their structure as a church. And so we went with that. We started talking about when Jesus is CEO, when the church is doing business with a third-party entity. That was our volume 2. And then volume 3, and I'm going from memory. I don't have a book in my office today, you guys. Volume 3 is when we started talking about the ultimate merger, partnering with other entities. There are certain organizations, for-profit organizations, and some non-profit organizations that the church cannot legally do business with. And I don't think many churches know that. And so because of that, we created this volume called The Ultimate Merger that looked at the partnerships between churches and other organizations that are problematic to the infrastructure of your remaining a church. Remember, If you're sued and you don't say you're a church, you're not a church. But you have to prove, if you say you're a church, you have to prove. It's called an affirmative defense. You have to prove that you are, in fact, a church. And so that becomes very, very questionable when you have violated certain rules that the IRS sets. Because remember, what makes a church, our volume 10, is actually designed to teach you that the standard for being a church in these United States of America is set by the Internal Revenue Service. So someone that doesn't have a care in the world about what a church does internally is basically saying, this is what you have to look like. In order to be a church, you must look like a church, act like a church, think like a church, and perform the community and charitable services of a church. That is critical. That's critical. I don't know how I can get that through anyone's head, because so many people say, well, it's not a big issue, Michelle. It is a big issue. You must perform like a church and you must be in compliance. And so I say that to say, one of the biggest tools that we use to help churches is what we call the laudit. Now, you have seen, if you Google, you can put legal audit and you will get a check sheet, and it will tell you some of the things that should be looked at when a legal audit is performed. A laudit, what we have created, is far more extensive than a legal audit, okay? So I want to go through some of the things that we cover on a laudit, so that you can decide whether or not your church or your organization needs one. Many churches that we talk to have never had a laudit done. They've never had anything looked at. They basically say, hey, we had somebody come and do an accounting audit 15 years ago. We had a review, 8 years ago. But when we talk about legal reviews of your church, because a laudit looks at the operations of a church in line, just like similar to a financial audit, but entirely different and beyond the scope, because we're looking at all of the legal issues, because whether you know it or not, everything that a church does has legal implications. Any organization. Everything that you do has legal implications. And so if you are basically saying that you are operating a church and you are getting certain types of benefits from other organizations, then you're not a church. We often talk about the church in Florida that decided that during spring break, the pastor said, I'm tired of not making any money. I'm tired of these clubs all around us making all this money. So the church came up with a plan. And this plan was they were going to host parties during spring break. Well, it was fine for 1 minute. They were charging, they were making some money, and then they got greedy. And they started hosting these parties and selling alcohol. And once they started selling alcohol, that's when the problem came in, because now you're no longer a church. You're operating as something else. They went and got an alcohol license. They did all of this stuff, but they were no longer a church, and they didn't even know it until they received a letter from the IRS stripping them of their 501c3 status. Now, I know many of you said, well, I don't even have a 501c3 status, so they couldn't do anything to me. You're still a church, and once that status has been removed away from you, can never get it back as the church in which you applied for the application, or the church that was found to be in violation of the compliance area that made you a church in the first place. So many churches think, I don't want to file a 501c3 because I don't want to be, have the umbrella of the federal government over me. Well, wake up, pastors, please wake up. The IRS makes a determination of what makes a church, not you. So you could say, we're just going to be in the backwoods worshiping God and nobody can bother us. Well, that's fine if it's 4 of you in the backyard. But the more your numbers increase, the more you get involved in what we call secular affairs of the community, of the church. Once you start cooking those chicken dinners, you have become more than a church, because that's a secular engagement. Anytime you're doing business with anyone, that makes you have crossed the line from being just a solid formation of a church where the law has no jurisdiction over you, even though we wish that were true. That's not the case. But you've crossed the line. So you've gone too far. And I'm constantly telling pastors this. So let me talk a little bit about the laudit itself. Laudit looks at, it's called a multidisciplinary review of an organization, and we call it a laudit, not your standard legal audit, but we call this one a laudit. And so we are looking at the operations of your church, and of course, as I said before, we're looking at it from the perspective of the legal issues that no one thinks about. So let me give you, our laudits have 10 points, but I'm only going to share with you 5 for the sake of time on this show, since we're about halfway in. I'm going to start with them. Security, your governance structure or your infrastructure. So that's number 2. Your safety is number 3. Labor is number 4. And of course, your federal and tax compliance issues is number 5. We do 10 points, but I'm just for purposes of my competitors that are listening, I want to talk about the top 5. So let's start with easy one, security. Many churches, in light of Mother Emanuel and all the devastation that happened to the Charleston 9 and to that community that's still growing afterwards, as we get prepared to go in and visit them on our tour, have to have security procedures. And many churches didn't believe this until they started seeing the amount of crime that was happening in churches across the country. But in this review, we're looking at more than just your what we call crisis management plan to protect your members or your guests from any type of occurrence if it's foreseeable. We're looking at the policies and procedures that you have on security, whether you have a security force. Who are the people that are charged with mandating security in your church? Your computers, that's a huge issue. If you have employees or if you have workers in the church, or if the church operates an office during the day, those computers, that's a security issue. Technology, emails, what's subpoenable and what's not subpoenable, what can go on a computer. You've got an employee sitting in the office of the church looking at pornography. Those sites are monitored. So they could send something out, particularly if they send something out to a minor, and the next thing you know, the police are there. And they bombarded your place and confiscated all your computers. It's happened. It's happened to churches across the country. So you have to have policies on computer usage when we talk about computers in a church. There's got to be policies on internet policy, and there's got to be a policy on computer usage. Now, what I hear from many churches is you tell me that you don't allow your employees to look at Facebook or any of the social media websites. Let me warn you, there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there that you should be thinking about besides Facebook and the social media websites, okay? So these are some of the things that we discuss with you in Allotted, okay? So that's a little bit breakdown of the security measures that we cover in our Allotted. Let's talk about labor. Let's talk about labor as number 2. Labor, then, as you know, is going to be your employees. Now, churches often tell me, well, we don't have any employees, Michelle. But they fail to realize that if you're paying someone on a routine basis, or if you control what it is they do or the hours in which they do it, the Department of Labor says that's an employee. You can call it a contractor. You can call it a contractual employee. They don't care what you call it. That's an employee. And churches are really known for going and hiring people or allowing people to do work, call them a volunteer, control their time, have someone else do the exact same work that person is doing, and say that one of them is not an employee. You got a problem. You've got a problem, because what determines who is an employee and who's not an employee? It's the Department of Labor. And so you have to be very careful. And so we look at that. We look at all of the people that are working in the church to determine if, in fact, their roles are legal employee roles. Why? Because that's when all the laws jump in with regard to human resources, okay? So that's a big issue. So we look at your employees. We look at volunteers. We look at people that you have on stipend. Churches are known. We just gave him a stipend. He drives a van every Sunday. We give him a stipend every month. That's not a stipend, boo. That is a paycheck. according to the Department of Labor standards. We look at the salaries that you're paying. We look at the benefits that you have and the retirement packages. And sadly, guys, what we see a lot of is that when it comes to pastors, horrible retirement packages. I mean, just really getting ripped off. These people have given their lives to this church and they have no retirement package. So those are the type of things that we do, that we look at. But not only do we look at it, we negotiate those things for you. So we can step in and negotiate some of these services for you. We do that as well. And so that's why we call ours a multidisciplinary review of the organization. Okay, so that's labor. Number three, let's talk about, what did I say? Let's talk about an easy one. Let's go federal and tax. So here, you all know this one. We're looking at whether or not you are a 501c3, whether or not it's to your benefit to consider becoming a 501c3. We look at lobbying and political campaigns and unrelated business income, because that's the biggest one the IRS is looking at, is what are you doing with the money? And is the money related to the charitable purpose to which you created the organization? Because if it's not, it could be deemed by the IRS as unrelated business income. And of course, we then look at foundations. And so I'm often talking to churches about whether or not they need to set up another structure for what they have become. Do they need to set up a CDC? Do they need to set up a community development corporation? Do they need to set up some sort of foundation for the scholarships that they give? But those are the type of decisions that we make when we look at the federal and tax part of your laudit. Okay, so number four, let's talk about, I'm gonna save the largest one for last, but let's talk about safety. Safety is a huge thing. We talked about security, but remember, security and safety are two different things, okay? Because when we talk about safety, we're looking at, if you're running a daycare or you have a school within the church, those type of safety measures are mandated by law. Particularly when you have children around. So that's a heightened level of security and safety. But they're not the same. People often get the security element and the safety element mixed up, but they're not the same. And so when we're talking about safety, we're talking about your building codes. We're talking about, making sure that your permits are in order, your building codes are in order, that you have had inspections in the appropriate time that you're supposed to have inspections, particularly if you have elevators. We deal with this a lot. But that you've had the proper inspections, that you have a transportation policy, things like that, any type of prevention mechanisms that you could have in place. That's where safety comes in. We're really dealing with what procedures or what policies or practices that you have in place to ensure that the people that are coming in as invitees and guests to your organization and those that are utilizing your services or in any way that they are safe or deemed to be safe. What mechanism have you put into place? So that's a little bit different than the laudit that looks at the security, the part of the laudit that looks at security. And so when I'm meeting with churches, they often say, well, I'm a little confused here. I didn't know I had to give this information, but yeah, we do them both because that's very, very, very important. Okay, so the final area that I want to talk about today in our time together, you guys, is going to be the biggest one, and that's what we call the infrastructure. And that's the biggest part of what I do as a national policy advisor in this area. The biggest part of what I do is going to be focused on how you are structured, because if you're not a church, if you're not deemed a religious organization, if you're not deemed a nonprofit organization, then you are in big trouble. And so I've spent most of my time here because this is where I see the most damage to the religious or what we call sacred organizations. Okay, so in the infrastructure, you all know, I'm going to start right out, Constitution and bylaws. I'm going to look at your state filings and your federal filings and how you are structured as an organization. Many churches don't know what type of organization they are. They say, well, we're a church. What type of church? Are you a membership organization? Are you completely run by a board? What type of organizational structure have you elected to do? And do you understand the structure that you have in place? Because 9 times out of 10, beloved, they don't know. So that's what I'm really trying to focus on. I look at your leaders. Who are your leaders? Whether background checks were done on them, credit checks. What did you do? What kind of vetting process did you do for your leaders? And then let's talk about boards. Do you have an adequately designed board? There are many regulations under the IRS, many regulations under state law that governs what type of board has to sit in a nonprofit organization. You can't go without a board. You have to have either a board of advisors, a board of trustees, whatever you want to call them. But you need to have chief fiduciaries, those that are responsible for keeping that organization in the black. Okay? So your boards, your minutes, the tenure of that board. We've got organizations, particularly churches, whose boards are in perpetuity? And basically, they can be in office forever. Well, in certain areas, that is against the law. You can't do it. So these are the type of things that we look at when we talk about boards. We look at your officers. We look at your relationships with third parties. We look at your organizational structure. I mentioned that before. Look at your financial policies to see what kind of fiscal procedures do you have in place to protect this organization. Those are very critical. We look at your conflicts and your ethics policies. Do you have a conflicts of interest policies, procedures, and practices? Do you have all of your board members sign non-disclosure agreements? What are you doing to secure the public funds that you are taking in? Those become critical questions for us. And finally, in the infrastructure section, we look at, do you have the adequate insurance coverage? I don't know how many times I can say this. And like I told you, we're going to have Diana Oliver on. She's speaking at the 2017 Church at Risk National Summit this year. And she's a big partner with ours. And she'll be coming on. And we're going to be interviewing her so that we can talk about the top 10 issues for you guys with regard to insurance. And like I said, I've got some great speakers coming to you this summer that I want you to hear from. I want you to hear what type of information they have for you. And my job is to bring it to you. I can't thank you guys enough for just letting me, for listening to me. I really appreciate it. I'm in awe. I'm really in awe. But those are the types of things that you get when you talk about a legal audit, or what we call a laudit, which is quite more extensive than that. And as I said, we do 10 to a 15-point laudit. Most organizations are only going to require the 10. We also do what's called the mini laudit. And what I went over with you guys today is what we call the mini laudit. It's quite less expensive. What we wanted to do is we wanted to have a tool in place for those that could afford it, that could afford a full audit and felt that the time had come, that their organization had to have a full audit, and then we wanted to do one for those that are maybe newer organizations or smaller organizations, or just had something. They may have had an audit 2 years ago. And so we want to make sure that there's something that they have. And this is much less to spend. It's very affordable. It takes you through the 5 conceptual areas that I mentioned on today. We do an incredible job. We don't just review. We also write the policies and procedures that you need. And we put the controls in place to protect you from a lawsuit, protect you from any type of legal or compliance challenge from the IRS or any regulatory entity. Okay? So that's what I'm so concerned about. I just want to make sure that the churches are protected. I just want to make sure that nobody blindsides you anymore and comes at you with a lawsuit. I've seen devastation everywhere, but I've also seen growth in the 3 or 4 years that we have been that we brought to you Church at Risk. Now, we've been running an ecclesiastical law center now for 7 years, and so next year we will actually be celebrating the ecclesiastical law division, which is now no longer a part of our organization. We have taken that division, our ecclesiastical law division, and we've now put it as the central focus of our new nonprofit, The Sacred Veil. So check us out on the website, www.thesacredveil.org, or you can still go to www.themdr group, or now you can go to www.churchatrisk. All right, and for those of you that are planning on registering for the 2017 National Summit, the website is www.themdr.org. www.churchnationalsummit.com. You can go to any of our websites. You can go to our Facebook page, and we will route you to the right place. So if you don't get it, remember Church at Risk. Go to Church at Risk, and Church at Risk will take you directly into the summit. Remember that registration is open. Registration is open right now, and so you can register. We're asking you guys to register. We have this block of rooms available for you at the Renaissance Capitol View Hotel in Arlington, Virginia. We can't hold them too much into the fall, but we want to get you guys registered and get you guys a room with a view. I know it's going to be an event that you're going to absolutely enjoy and absolutely learn so much. So I am looking forward to talking to you about this more. Once again, this is your girl, the Holy Ghost Amplifier, Michelle Rhett. Listen, I am praying that you have a wonderful Father's Day weekend. For those of you who feel that you are fatherless, remember that you are not. Jesus Christ, God our Father, Jesus his Son, loves you, and cares for you even if you do not have the physical presence of a father. For those of you who know men who don't have children, that you just want to be their child for that day, why don't you reach out to them and offer them a lunch or something to celebrate them? There's so many great guys out there. I'm not the type of woman that believes that all men are dogs, so that you'll never hear that out of my mouth. But because I raise sons, so I know that there are some good men out there, and I know some good men. My brothers and my father to be that, my uncles that have helped raise me into the woman that I am today. So God bless you. Have a wonderful week. Until we meet again, this is Church at Risk Live. This is Michelle D. Rhett, the Holy Ghost Amplifier. Have a wonderful week. God loves you, and so do I.